The story of the Great Flood, which in the Judeo-Christian sphere is associated with Noah's Ark, is an almost universal archetype. Tales exist not just in the Bible, but in Hindu, Sumerian and Chinese folklore. The story also appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh and in Native American folklore. One might also consider the scant references from Plato of the mythical disappearance of Atlantis beneath the waves. Was this rendition an allegorical injunction against hubris, or a kernel of truth from a dim and distant past at the dawn of human society? The only primary sources for Atlantis are Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. The dialogues claim to quote the Athenian lawmaker Solon, who visited sacred Egyptian sites between 590 and 580 BC. The story goes that he translated Egyptian records of Atlantis. Writing in 360 BC, around 200 years after the death of Solon, Plato introduced Atlantis in Timaeus. He wrote, "For it is related in our records how once upon a time your state stayed the course of a mighty host, which, starting from a distant point in the Atlantic Ocean, was insolently advancing to attack the whole of Europe and Asia to boot. For the ocean there was at that time navigable. For in front of the mouth which you Greeks call, as you say, the Pillars of Heracles, there lay an island which was larger than Libya and Asia together, and it was possible for the travellers of that time to cross from it to the other islands, and from the islands to the whole of the continent over against them, which encompasses that veritable ocean. For all that we have here, lying within the mouth of which we speak, is evidently a haven having a narrow entrance, but that yonder is the real ocean, and the land surrounding it may most rightly be called, in the fullest and truest sense, a continent. Now in this island of Atlantis there existed a confederation of kings, of great and marvellous power, which held sway over all the island, and over many of other islands also, and parts of the continent. So it seems the Atlanteans had got too big for their boots in attacking and conquering other lands, and were ultimately brought low by a series of natural disasters following a war between the Empire of Atlantis and the nations that lay inside the Pillars of Hercules, thought by many to refer to the Strait of Gibraltar. This cataclysmic battle and subsequent disastrous reckoning was said to have taken place 9,000 years before Plato's Socratic character Critias's timeline. On the destruction and deluge that swallowed the continent, Critias said, "But afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared in the depths of the sea. For which reason the sea in those parts is impassable and impenetrable, because there is a shoal of mud in the way, and this was caused by the subsistence of the island." In the biblical sense, the book of Genesis, chapter 6, verse 17 reads, "And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh wherein is the breath of life, from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die." But what is the truth, if any, of this alleged divine retribution? Some researchers argue that there was an ancient Black Sea flood, which could, with a few millennia of embellishment, match the level of devastation described, although doubts remain as this location is nowhere near Gibraltar. However, it is only a problem in my own conflation of the Great Flood with the sinking of Atlantis. So, leaving that aside for a moment, let us look at the evidence for the Black Sea being the location of the Great Flood. This is Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, where just outside the city centre en route to the airport is the majestic volcanic Mount Vitosha, which features a number of caves. It is in this fascinating geological warren, which is the longest subterranean cave complex in Bulgaria, that Professor Yavor Shopov of Sofia University found the evidence he claims proves that the Great Flood was real. He pointed to ancient residue in one particular cave in the form of stalagmites and stalactites to substantiate his theory. He said, "All these stalagmites and stalactites, they are formed as a result of rainwater passing through the bedrock." Like tree rings, he says he was able to calculate rainfall levels going back thousands of years. One layer in the sequence was found to be far thicker than any of the others. Professor Shopov said, "It has been formed 7,500 years ago, and there was 50 times present-day precipitation. We have a special theory about this." He demonstrated the theory using a cross-section of one of the stone formations. In one of the bands of sediment, there was evidence of a massive increase in rainfall. The academic claims this could be the result of an impact of a heavenly body on the sun. If a very large asteroid would fall directly onto the surface of the sun, he said, The professor argues the impact of an asteroid measuring around 2 to 3 kilometers in radius caused a huge increase in solar radiation, known as a solar flare. Professor Shopov says that after the impact, there would be a rapid rise in the Earth's temperature, causing huge seawater evaporation and leading to a massive increase in rainfall. That's the kind of event which is described in the historical sources, he said. He added, "There are really not so many asteroids so big, so that's why, hopefully, this kind of event may happen quite rarely." Others point to a Black Sea flood at the end of the last ice age, with melting ice causing a drastic increase in sea levels. Mediterranean seawater rapidly flowed through the Bosphorus, creating the Black Sea from a previous freshwater lake. Professor Petko Dimitrov of the Institute of Oceanology, Bulgarian Academy of Sciences in Varna, said the first evidence of the Black Sea flood are the old shorelines found in the Black Sea basin. This ancient shoreline lies at around 90 to 120 meters deep. He analysed core samples from the seabed and found remains of shells and plankton that could not have lived in salt water. It was suggested that Neolithic settlements on the original banks of the body of water were submerged and destroyed by the rising water levels. In 2011, researcher Konstantin Chetarev led a team that carried out surveys in the Black Sea. One probe was dredged up and contained pieces of wood that Chetarev claims were from a drowned Neolithic settlement. He said, "There's no way these pieces of wood could be from a ship or something. There's no way for them to be there, except if there's an ancient village or something at that depth." Professor Dimitrov and colleagues even claim to be confident of one day finding Noah's Ark in the Black Sea. In a 2006 paper called The Flood in the Black Sea, Science and Mythology, the team wrote, juxtaposing the data from the Black Sea natural events and the archaeo-mythology, as well as the legend of Noah's Ark, we can claim with a high degree of reliability that the remains of the Ark are located within the Black Sea bottom. They are situated at contemporary depths of about 40 meters, where Noah's ship anchored after the flood. During the last 8,000 years, the remains of the ship and Noah's grave have been covered with alluvial and marine silts. The discovery of the remains is a task of high priority for modern marine archaeology. The restoration of deep-water geo-archaeological exploration is not only a matter of prestige for marine science, but also an important criterion for clarifying a key page of the most ancient human history that transpired in our lands. Archaeology could also point to an advanced Black Sea civilization. The intricate and mathematically detailed objects in the hoard known as the Varna necropolis gold is more than 6,000 years old and could represent evidence of the oldest European civilization. It is theorized that the civilization was devastated by the flood, but refugees migrated to other places, taking their knowledge and stories of the flood with them, leading to ancient Egyptian, Greek and Sumerian civilizations more than 1,000 years later. This could be the genesis of the legend of Atlantis, or at least the central truth of the far-reaching Great Flood myth. That's it for this video. Don't forget to like, share and most importantly subscribe, and thank you for watching.